This video tutorial will show you how to edit the custom data you've imported into Dave's Redistricting app, or DRA. If you're not sure how to import custom data, check out our video tutorial linked in the description below. After you have imported a custom dataset, you cannot change any of the values of the dataset. However, you can make changes to certain characteristics of the data after importing it, including the name, coloring, and other formatting choices. You can also create new columns of data based on existing columns in the dataset. To make any of these changes, go to My Maps and select My Datasets, then click on the data you want to edit, then click it again or select Edit. Here you can change the name and the year of the dataset. Override formatting allows you to customize how the data is displayed in the data panels when viewing your map. If you select Override formatting, you can remove columns from the dataset by selecting the X at the far right, change the ordering of the columns by selecting the up or down arrows in the middle, or combine two or more columns into a third new column. For example, I've imported data on voter turnout by race and ethnicity for the 2022 general elections in Nevada. It contains counts of registered voters by race and ethnicity, as well as counts of voters who voted in the 2022 election by race and ethnicity. I'd like to create a column that calculates the turnout rate for Hispanics. To do this, click Add Format and give your new column a caption or column name and description. As always, detailed descriptions are strongly encouraged, so I'll call this new column HISP_turnout and explain in the description that it is turnout among registered Hispanic voters. The expression is where you calculate the data in your new column. For this, I will divide the count of Hispanic voters who voted by the count of all registered Hispanic voters. You can also change whether percentages are included and the number of decimal places that are reported with those percentages in your map. It is important to think about whether percentages make sense to calculate and display automatically for your data, or whether you want to create your own percentages as new columns. Percentages are calculated based on the tote column, which is short for total. Unless you included a specific tote column in the dataset you imported, DRA will calculate the total for you by summing all the columns in your dataset. The reason why I do not want to display percentages is that this data contains several different data points that do not make sense to sum into a tote column. The tote column will sum total registered voters, total registered Hispanic voters, total registered Hispanic voters who voted in the 2022 election, and so on. It is unclear what meaning could be derived by summing voters that appear in multiple columns like this. That leaves me with two options. Option 1 is to create a new dataset outside of DRA that contains data on registered Hispanic voters who voted and data on registered Hispanic voters who didn't vote, and import that. DRA will calculate a tote column that is the sum of these two and should be equal to the total number of registered Hispanic voters. Option 2 is to deselect Show Percentages and create a new column within the dataset I've already imported that is equal to the total number of registered Hispanic voters who voted divided by the total number of registered Hispanic voters. When creating your own percent column like this, make sure to increase the number of decimal points shown from 0 to 2 or more. I can also use this column to color the map by the Hispanic turnout rate. To make a column available for coloring in the map, select it and then select Show in Color By, which will allow you to color the map in grayscale. Alternatively, you can add custom hex codes or generate entirely new columns to color your map in custom colors. To do this, select Override Coloring and either select a column you previously selected to color the map in grayscale by, or generate a new column. Just moments ago, I created a new column of turnout among registered Hispanic voters, which will display in the data panels. Now I want to recreate the same column to color the map with this data. As before, I need to specify a caption, a description, and an expression. I will also need to specify the number of stops and colors using 6-digit hex codes. For the purposes of this demonstration, I have already looked up some hex codes to correspond with varying numbers of stops and placed them in this text file. Stops are very important for how the data will ultimately look in a map. Stops indicate where and how often in the data your colors will change. For example, if you enter only 2 stops, one at 0 and one at 1, then you will have just 2 colors that are most noticeable at the extremes of the data with a gradient in between. Alternatively, you could enter 5 stops, one at 0 and one at 1, then 3 more in between at 0.4, 0.5, and 0.6. This will make data in the middle range more noticeable on your map and is what the partisan lean coloration utilizes. If you want to avoid gradients and instead use a single block of color for some range of values, enter 2 stops at the same place, then repeat the hex codes. For example, you could enter stops at 0, 0.5, 0.5 again, and 1. Enter one hex code twice, and then another hex code twice to visually break up the data into below and above 50%. It is generally recommended to keep the number of stops in your data between 3 and 7, but it depends on the data you are working with. You should also be careful about what hex codes and colors you select. There are many free resources online to look up hex codes. One site we recommend is colorbrewer2.org for looking up map-friendly coloring schemes and hex codes. Selecting the right number of stops and hex codes for your particular dataset may take some time, but it is worth it to display your data appropriately. In a lot of cases, you will want to place stops wherever the variation in your data is. With the turnout data we saw earlier, for example, the values ranged widely, giving us a lot of options for stops. A different situation arises with this dataset, which contains county-level data on the percent of voters who are female. A quick glance at the data shows me that nearly all of the values are between 47 and 51% across the entire state. If I only set stops at 0 and 1, I will generate a very uninteresting map. But if I set stops at 0, 0.47, 0.49, 0.51, and 1, and select a sensible coloring scheme, my map will be quite powerful. So we encourage you to play around with this feature until you find something you like. Note that the hex codes are always 6 characters preceded by a hashtag. Hex codes should be entered with their hashtags and separated by commas. Advanced users can download the JSON containing metadata on the columns and custom coloring and upload that for any other dataset to replicate the formatting. Or you can always make a copy of your dataset or any other published dataset. This will also copy over the formatting and coloring, which can be subsequently edited if desired. Now you're ready to see your custom data on a map in DRA. Go to your map and select the gear icon in the top right-hand corner. Scroll down to Choose Custom Datasets, select your dataset of interest, and click Apply. Now, under Districts and Precincts, you can select Custom on the left-hand side panel, where you can then select your data to display. You will also see the column names on the right-hand side panel, along with the values, which change as you move your mouse over the map. You can select blocks, precincts, cities, or counties to see the data for that level of geography. If you select the state name at the top, you can also see the statewide values for your custom data. We hope you enjoy this powerful new feature. Happy mapping!